All right, hi everybody, welcome. My name is Erin Fields. I am the brand specialist at Cadmium, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. And you are in From Problem to Prompt, a case-based presentation on the use of AI tools for CME professionals and LMS administrators. So if that's what you wanted, you're in the right place. Before we get started, just want to let you know that we do use our audience response system for questions and answers. So if you're in the app, you can click on this session. There's a Q&A button at the bottom. That's where you can type your questions in. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to read the questions out to our speakers. They'll answer them. If there's any discussion happening, I can bring the mic to you. And today's session is all about AI and how you can use it to your advantage. Learn about tools you can use now for improved efficiency, as well as what to expect in the future of AI in education professionals. And our speakers today are Director of Client Services, Raja Venkata, and special guest, Andrew Dodson with the University of North Carolina. So let's welcome Raja and Andrew. And Raja, take it away.
Thanks, Erin. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for joining this session on AI. We've all have been hearing so much about AI that it was an obligation for us to have a session on AI. So thank you so much for making it to this session. We will talk about practical tools that we've used in Ethos and other LMS systems in this presentation. And I'm joined by an esteemed guest. We will demystify what he's doing. I'll pass it on to Andrew.
Do this. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Dodson, and I am a continuing education specialist at the University of North Carolina at the Lineberger Comprehensive Cancer Center. So the Cadmium product we use is Ethos. A lot of these examples are going to be from there. And we obviously primarily give out continuing education credits for oncology professionals. Yep.
Wonderful. A quick review, again, mandatory learning objective slide. The goal here is to talk about practical applications of generative AI. So Andrew and myself, we've used generative AI in lots of applications. We certainly didn't want to boil the ocean in an hour, so we've taken one slice of the CME use cases. So today we're going to talk more about audience engagement and audience generation. That's the core focus of the examples that we're going to talk about. If someone is interested in exploring other examples, we've worked on other examples as well, which we will talk about at the very end. For now, that's our lens that we'll go through as a part of this session. So first, we'll talk about some of the use cases. Like the name suggests, problem to prompt. We will talk about the problem, then we'll talk about the tool, and then we'll talk about the output. And quick disclosure, the name problem to prompt is not an AI-generated title. It is copyrighted with our esteemed guest. All right, so we'll talk about different examples, which is the second learning objective. And then the third, we will talk a little bit about the future of AI. You probably know as much as we do at this point, because it changes quite often. But we will try to just give a little bit of an overview about what we think the future could hold.
Okay. So we're going to start off with a poll question by a raise of hands. How many of you use an AI tool like ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, anything, every day in your daily work? Okay. So we have some. I probably use it daily. Even on my keyboard, I have a button to push that takes me right to ChatGPT at this point. So if anybody does not use it daily, then maybe this presentation will help get rid of some of that reluctance, or maybe give you some ideas of what you can use it for, because it is a powerful tool, as you're going to see with some of our examples. So with that being said, we're going to build a course. And we're going to start from beginning to end. We're going to start with the inception, maybe doing a little bit of SEO research. We're going to then go into elements of course design that you would do for your Ethos or Elevate product. Publicity and marketing. Once you have the course built, then we're going to need to promote it. And then how to tie it all together with some project management. All of these which can benefit from the use of AI, because really, maybe a lot of you empathize with me. I sometimes feel like a jack of all trades, but a master of absolutely none of them. And AI helps me in my daily work get a little bit closer to that higher level status so that we can make things look a little bit fancier when we're creating our courses. So with that, I think we're going to start with the first one, SEO research.
Awesome. So I'll walk through the first SEO research use case, and the order we're going to follow is we'll take one prompt or one problem statement, we'll walk through the prompt, try to dissect it a little bit. We are not trying to convert this into a prompting session, but a little bit as to what went into that prompt, look at the output, and then look at other use cases as well. That's the order we'll follow along. This is the first use case in terms of SEO research. And as you can see there are several use cases for using ChatGPT or any generative AI tool in SEO. And these are some examples, starting from keyword generation, looking at your competitors, looking at what content resonates well with people, and then suggesting content and asking the generative AI tool to modify the content. So all of these are legit examples, and we'll look through some of these in the next slide as well. So here is an overview there. As we all know, it's a rapidly evolving science in terms of SEO. The generative AI advent has actually accelerated it, and you may have seen these days when you're doing a search, the AI-generated results show up on the top before you get to the exact, the usual SEO-generated content. So it's not going away. It is going to stay. We are probably better served by just getting ahead of it, or at least keeping track of it. So the second thing is, in terms of the landscape, there are different aspects to it, like social media, or mobile compatibility that get into SEO, which we are all familiar with. If you do have SEO experts on your team, they would probably be able to decipher more use cases as well, hopefully with some of these that you're going to learn today. Next slide, please. OK, so let's start with the problem, like I said. My goal here is before I start planning a CME activity, I want to start off with finding out what popular keywords is my course targeting. That's my very first step in planning a CME activity. So my problem here is, or problem statement, so to speak, is I need to know the top 10 keywords on a course topic. And I've selected opioids management as an example, but this could be any topic that you're working on. In fact, it doesn't even have to be CME. It could be any kind of healthcare education topic, or as a matter of fact, non-medicine topic as well. So for that, what I did is I started off with a prompt. And it's a snippet of the prompt. As we know, prompting is an iterative technique. I didn't get it really well in the first one. In fact, my first prompt was to develop a poem on the beauty of Chicago, which was much better than my linguistic skills, to be honest. So that's how I learned prompting, just looking at simple use cases, doing a poem for my 8-year-old, talking about a good story and things like that. So you all can define what your favorite prompt is, but the important thing is none of these are set in stone. Whatever prompt we're going to show you, it's more like a starting point. You would have to develop your own prompts, hopefully using this as an initial start. So this is what I did. I asked the system to search the top 10 CME provider websites, and then I asked it to list the top 10 popular keywords and the top 10 CME websites it's looking at. So my goal was, before I even plan my landing page content, I wanted to understand what are those juicy SEO words as of today, and who are my other competitors or other CME providers who are utilizing those keywords. Next slide, please. And so this is what ChatGPT has generated. This is current as of yesterday, last night, 2 a.m. to be precise. Yeah. This was the prompt output that was generated. And as you can see there, we've tried to have a few of the popular keywords listed out there. And I think what is really important to pick up there is not every keyword is value-added keyword. And that is important when you're trying to look at a ChatGPT or any generative AI output. Some of these keywords that you're looking at are things you would probably add regardless in your course landing page. To me, I think what really stood out was substance use disorder. That seems to be really the top 10 keywords that are being used. To me, that wasn't super intuitive when I was thinking about opioid use disorder. So that was a nice addition. And then addiction medicine, opioid therapy seems to be those keywords. So these are just some keywords that came out of it. And then I also looked at the CME provider websites that it provided to me. And some of you who may be familiar with CME, you see that the indexing was pretty reasonable. These are some of the websites that you would be looking at. Unsurprisingly, some of these are Cadmium Ethos-E websites. I clicked that and confirmed that as well. So some of these are the top CME provider websites that the ChatGPT indexed before it gave us the content. So a few things that really stood out to me is getting into that detail as to what you want the system to do, and then really bulleting out the format of the output. My first prompt was just looking at the keywords, but then I was a little confused as to what were the websites. Are they authentic? Are they reliable? But now that I've given it the top 10 websites, now I feel a little more comfortable that these were the sites that were looked at. Any questions, or does anyone else, have they tried out using SEO on their course landing pages and is willing to share their stories with us? Doesn't have to be successful always, but. All right, well, hopefully this gives you a little bit of a starting point to test these out, and let us know how it turned out. All right, so these are a few more applications in terms of building your course. We've started off with the first one, which is identifying your keywords, looking at your competitor websites, finding out what keywords make the most sense, which is the first example that we looked at. The second example is writing a course description and then making it keyword rich. This I've seen in terms of how some of the other Ethos customers use. They've tried to mix and match stuff out. Sometimes they give a certain description, and then they use the feedback from the previous prompt and say, rewrite this description, including the following 10 keywords, and make it more SEO enriching. Sometimes people just ask ChatGPT to write a description. I've seen it give mixed results, because as we know, it doesn't always give you the right output. So I personally, when I spoke to customers, they've said it's a little more realistic if you give it a paragraph and say, modify this paragraph, keep the meaning intact, but add these juicy keywords. That kind of gives you that mileage, I think. And then the last one is reviewing the web page HTML to make suggestions, coming up with meta tags, and coming up with mobile images, which Andrew will walk us through the rest of the presentation. So these are some examples. Hopefully, through the rest of the presentation, you're going to see a few more where now that we've captured the audience, we are now going to look at how to engage them through different tools. And I'll pass it on to Andrew to help us out with that.
Okay. So the next topic that we have is with course design. And a lot of us maybe have very customized CSS on our sites where you may not necessarily be able to change a whole lot of how it looks, but a lot of us don't, and we have a lot of homegrown Ethos or Elevate courses, or maybe a different department wants their own landing page for a series of their courses. And much like the song goes, sometimes love just isn't enough, and neither is the WYSIWYG editor. So, sometimes what you see is not what you get, and what you get is not what you wanted to see. So I don't know if anybody can also empathize with that, and sometimes the needs extend beyond the tools that are available there. So it really helps to have HTML or a CSS background, and I personally do not, but utilizing generative AI has really helped me learn how to do that, as well as just given me a lot of code that I can work with and I can implement. So with course design, if you're an LMS administrator, sometimes it falls on you as the last team member to see the content before it's published to the user screen. So if you notice that a word is misspelled or the wrong color, for instance, you may have to dive into that source code button and try to find the right hex code to insert the branding. Because, of course, branding is important, and consistency is important for many reasons, but it usually does extend beyond the capacity of the typical WYSIWYG editor. And that's where, of course, the HTML and CSS really provides a strength to anybody who's implementing a design page that they've built on their own. And even if you do have some HTML or CSS experience, it's not always enough to, if you're like me and I'm not a web developer by training, it's not always enough to then go one step ahead of that and make your code responsive to different screen sizes, or make sure you have all the accessibility requirements for your users. So that's important, as we all know, because what a user initially sees will decide their engagement rate. And a professional, well-organized page where it's easy to find a course or easy to find the information that you need is crucial for this. So let's come up with an example, and we'll start easy. I just need a button for my web page, and I'm feeling pretty confident about this. I think ChatGPT 4.0 can solve this problem for me. Let's find a prompt. Simple enough. I'm typing into ChatGPT 4.0, please make me a button for a web page. And it very quickly and very easily provides me a format or outline of code. And it looks familiar to me. I see a CSS bracket, I see the HTML format there. This has to work. So I'm going to go to a course, I'm going to hit that scary source button, and I'm just going to copy and paste this code in there and see what happens. And it didn't work. As you can see, there seems to be an overflow of code, and I have no idea why. It seems like there is a button. I don't know where it leads me, but it doesn't look like something I'd want to click on, personally. So let's go back to our prompt and see if we can change anything. All right, we still have our problem. I need a button. Let's get more specific. Act as a web developer and give me code that will work in a WYSIWYG editor for a blue button with white font and rounded corners. So now you can see that the output is a little bit more streamlined. We no longer have that typical format that you'd see with a CSS and HTML separation. It looks more in line and a lot less. So let's see if that works. And it does. I've got my blue button, rounded corners, white font. And that is something that without reading any further, something I would click on. So
Andrew, if you could go back to the previous slide.
Yeah.
And just kind of demystify that prompt a little bit. It sounds like here you're giving a role. The previous one you tried to coax or flatter AI, where you said powerful AI, which clearly didn't work. But it sounded like you did something different here. Could you walk through that, the role-based of it, the role-based prompting?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you could tell from my first prompt, it was very simple. I'm expecting ChatGPT to read my mind, which I can't do yet. But I'm doing a couple things here. I'm first giving it an actor designation. So just out of habit at this point, when I first start a prompt, I'm giving it the occupation that it should have in order to train me to do something. And sometimes I'll go a step further with this, and I'll say, act as a such and such, teaching a beginner, so that way it gives me an output that is more conducive to somebody who doesn't understand everything. So I give it the actor designation as a web developer. I tell it where I'm working, which is a WYSIWYG editor. And then I add more detail to it so that it knows what to give me. And that seemed to work much better than what we had as an example of a bad prompt. Yeah. So let's move on to another problem, and this is one of my favorites. I have 3 courses to display on a splash page, and this is, from another department. I have a course series that they're developing, and they have their own branding requirements that are different from our custom global CSS. So we need to make that landing page a little bit more of a standout. And what you can do with the typical WYSIWYG editor is something like this. You could add your title to the title text field in Ethos, so it gives you the H1 introduction there. And then I've got my 3 courses, and they both have a header 2 on them. They're both hyperlinked. This is really everything you need to find this course page, but it looks terrible. If we go into the WYSIWYG editor just a little bit more to the extent of it, I can then change it so that it looks a little bit more centered. I've got another H2 title for some reason, a little description, the headrunner line, and then a table that I can use to put those courses centered. So it looks a little bit nicer, but still I think we could do better. And that's probably where the limitations of my skill set come into play. But if I turn to AI, I can work a little bit harder. So let's make this fancier. We're again going to act as a web developer using WYSIWYG editor, and I'm being specific here. I want to write inline HTML to create the base code for a following type of page. 3 separate tables in the same row, slightly shadowed background for each table, and a height that can include a picture as well as text. To me, this is what I would describe as a typical landing page would be for an example of 3 courses. And ChatGPT is anything but not confident. It clearly gives me a lot of outputted code that may or may not work. But even if you read that without me reading it out loud, you can see that there's some things that indicate that it might work for me. I've got some hidden HTML in there that says that I've got the 3 tables as intended. So I'm confident. And there you have, you can't see the shading too much on the screen, but I've got 3 different tables. I've got my placeholder for images. I've got the background of those tables a bit shadowed. And it seems to have given me another smaller table at the bottom that I can play with. So this looks a lot better. It looks a lot cleaner. And to me, this is where I can now play with the WYSIWYG editor and the toolbar as it was meant to. I can double-click on that image. I can insert the image I have. I can rewrite the table 1 for my title, and I can play with that last table just to add some text. And I can even pull in from our last example where I have that code for that button. It shouldn't be too hard to use a Control or Command F to find where that needs to go. So spending about maybe 5 minutes more just clicking around and adding the text that I have, we can create a very nice looking page. And I will say, when I was creating this as an example, it maybe took all of 5 minutes to do. The thing that took the longest was just picking which robot I wanted to use, which are also AI generated if you haven't noticed. But that just goes to show that once you have a foundation or AI used to give you a head start, it becomes a lot easier than to design your course page by just clicking and using the editor in a very basic sense. And as you can see, I drew in the, or not drew in, but I brought in the button that we liked so much. Yeah.
And Andrew, if I could add a little more use case to that, what he described is what you would have on a course landing page, but you could easily expand this on your home page. So if you're thinking about your homepage editor, you would see like a custom area, which is a homepage block. You could easily build a prompt which could say, I want to have 4 images, 2 images per row, and then build a prompt for it, get your HTML, and then include that in your custom HTML homepage block. So I think the applications could be any page that can take HTML. Wouldn't you agree,
Oh,
Andrew?
yeah, absolutely. It gives you a very strong foundation, and maybe this new landing page or this new course series needs a consistent branding, and we'll learn later on how to best do that, because although this work didn't take very long to do, it would be hard to repeat it using ChatGPT. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But in general, just some other ideas that I have personally used using AI for course design elements. Of course, we learned about adding custom graphical interfaces such as buttons or tables, drop-down menus. That all just helps with your intuitive user navigation. Creating responsive and stylized tables to organize courses and information. So what maybe I didn't mention with my earlier prompt, and you can add further prompts to this, take that code that it gave you where it looks nice, and then throw it back into ChatGPT and say, now make this mobile friendly. Because you may have the experience where you can read that HTML and you can change the little bits that you want to write in the source code. Adapting to the screen size is an advancement that maybe I'm not familiar with, and I am certainly not. So ChatGPT can certainly do that for you. So those tables, if I'd compressed that and you could see a mobile, it would have shown each table lined up perfectly for my phone. Code quality checks. So once you have the SEO recommendations maybe and accessibility standards that you need to add, you can, like I said, throw the code back into the generative processor and it'll give you a grade on it. It'll say what you need to improve on. And you can ask it to, give me a bulleted list what I can improve on with this code. And then you can create a prompt then to ask it to develop that for you. Adding custom banners to maintain branding. So that's just something that you can always add to when you're getting detailed in your prompts, you can be specific. You can say, I need this hex code, I need this type of font, and it will deliver with that. And I think that's important to really consider because otherwise you'll be just going to the source code yourself and having to change it ahead of time before publishing. One thing that I've experimented with also that I didn't know there was so much wiggle room with was when you're embedding elements into a page. So whether it's PowerPoints, PDFs, or videos, you can really ask AI, here's the presentation or the PDF that I need to embed. What kind of iframe attributes can I assign to this to help with this sort of task? So that's something that I'm playing with a little bit more, but it's something to keep in mind as an example. And of course, it is answering all of your coding questions for the inevitable issues that you're going to get. And a lot of those issues has helped say, well, I'm using a WYSIWYG editor. What can you do to change this so that it is more conducive to working after I publish? So in summary, ChatGPT can certainly write code for you, and it can teach you how to use it. And I've learned a lot by using ChatGPT to come up with the tables, the buttons, any of the graphical interfaces. It is a great resource.
And I think what I really like about these examples is we've heard so much about ChatGPT it tries to hallucinate, gives you data that you can't rely upon. These examples are easily testable. Remember the first prompt where he gave a superpower AI and then the button looked like crappy? But this, once you put in the code, you can test it yourself and then see if it's really working or not. So you can, in my mind, I think you can get over the hallucination aspect of it because you can test it out and see if it's really working for you.
Yeah. And I love that the term hallucination is actually used in artificial intelligence community, because one of the downsides with AI is that it is very confident. This is how you do it. It gives you an explanation for how it's done, even though it may be wrong. So when that happens, it's called a hallucination. Okay, so let's move on a little bit to marketing and publicity. And what I like to say, because I work on a small team, there's only really 2 of us that work on the Ethos platform. So I don't often have a lot of time to devote to marketing and publicity, but that is very important. SEO considerations aren't going to be the only thing that get users to your page. You're going to have to market it. And that may be with email marketing or social media, physical media, display advertising. And what I like to tell some of our leadership, even at my organization, is that you could have a full-time job for each of these. You could have somebody dedicated to doing social media all day long. It's really just as much as you want to get out of it is how much time you put into it. So these next couple little facts aren't terribly important. It's really just to emphasize that even if you are doing a lot of other things, accreditation, course design maybe, and you have some tasks with marketing, it's still an important component. And even when it comes to email marketing, there's a large return on investment for devoting time to that. And that's actually something that I've had a lot of experience with my team, and I've used AI more than they know. So let's look at our first problem. And we'll start with social media. So I need a social media post for an upcoming webinar. Now, as you've learned, oh, actually, this is different. So here, I'm going to start with this prompt. Act as a prompt engineer and help me write a prompt on how to make social media posts for Facebook with SEO considerations in mind. Tell me what you need to know to provide the post image and description.
While that's pulling out, could you walk through why you changed the tone for this prompt? Instead of just asking it to generate stuff, why did you ask it to act as a prompt engineer?
So this is a strategy that you can use to assign the occupation of prompt engineer. And ChatGPT can help you develop a good prompt. So what I basically asked it was, what do you need to know in order to give me what I want? So in order to create the eventual social media post, we're going to need to do maybe 2 prompts, maybe 3. But we're going to start by just asking it, what does it need to know? And you can see from the output, it's giving me that I need to know the purpose of the post, the target audience, the key message, the visual elements, the text content, and any additional information. So that's exactly what I did. I now created another prompt, copy and pasted, and and provided the text that it needed. And I just did that in an outline form. Number 1, I did the purpose of the post. This post will be such and such. The target audience, all audiences interested in learning about robots, and so on. So I did all 6 of those into my prompt. I just didn't write them here. But as a result, it gave me a fairly accurate social media post that I was looking for. And maybe your question is, couldn't I have just made this post quicker than going through 2 prompts and describing everything out? And the answer is no. I'm not a communications person. I don't even use that many emojis ever in my life. So this is way better than I could have come up with personally, not to mention the photograph that was, I think, really well done and was in line with the style that you've seen thus far. So now let's look at reminder emails. This is probably a mechanism of both Elevate and I know certainly Ethos. When you have a course or a live webinar and you want to set a reminder to go out like 2 days and then 2 hours before the webinar starts. Well, the default emails there are probably a little bit basic. You could just add the title and the description. You could use the WYSIWYG editor to center things. But as we've seen before, maybe that doesn't get quite as stylized as you want. So I want to make it better because I've already got something in place, but it is fairly basic. Act as a web designer. Make this HTML email more engaging. Include considerations for different email clients and accessibility devices, and use this Facebook banner image, the one we just made. This code should be able to work in a WYSIWYG editor. And then I took the reminder code that I had in Ethos, I clicked on the source, I grabbed the code, and I added it right there after the colon, the HTML code from the Ethos source. So originally, and then it gives us an output. So let's see what we had originally. And here's a fairly basic reminder, and it works. It's got the title, it's got a little bit of information, and it's got a hyperlink, albeit no button. So would I click on it? I don't know. But if you then use the code that ChatGPT gave you, and this was one prompt away, it gave you a very nice looking, engaging email with the header, the title, it used the image, and that wasn't the button I originally had, but it works. So other ways that I've used marketing and AI for marketing and publicity, and to an extent, anybody who didn't raise their hand, whether they use AI on a daily basis, you probably already are to an extent. If you're using big services like Facebook ads or Google ads, any social media manager, what you don't see is that behind the scenes there is machine learning happening where you're probably using that to best grab the right target audience, or maybe this is the best time of day to send out a post. So to an extent, you're already using it. But predictive analysis tools also are embedded with lots of AI. That's probably why we see it everywhere. And then, of course, like we just had an example for, content creation. Social media, stylized emails. It could write a whole blog post for you, or written content tailored to your audience with all the SEO in mind. And we'll skip that one. And the other thing that I didn't think of before until I started really diving into the use cases for AI, but A and B testing is something that's fairly important for marketing. What I've done is I've taken the HTML code from one of my emails, and then I've added the other one into the processor, and I've said, compare these two. Rate which one would have a higher spam score, or rate which one would have some accessibility concerns. And that's been fairly productive as well, because then I could choose the design that I want to then maintain going forward. Okay, so now with project management, we've first gone through SEO, we've gone through course design, and then we went over some publicity and marketing. I want to try to tie it together with some project management elements that I've used AI for. And that being said, I'm not a PMP, I am not a project manager, I just play one on TV, essentially. So to me, project management is repeatability. How can I then take all of those different elements of a course, and how can I make sure I'm consistent going forward? With those prompts, I may not always get the same output, or it may be a worse output. So we need to make sure we can be consistent, and we need to make sure we understand that maybe AI can help us automate some of these tasks. So that'll be my last example. So with this project management portion, just know that AI is not all-encompassing yet. Consistency and routine are key for this, and it helps improve quality control. So with these stats, really the thing I want to pay attention to is that there are studies, there are statistics that pull how many of us are using AI in our daily work. And according to our third point there, at least in 2023, 21% of respondents say they were using AI. I would imagine that number is going to get higher, and I imagine it's higher now. And then, we'll talk about future considerations, but I think all of us are going to be using it in our daily work very soon. This presentation may even seem very basic a year from now. So, I've given a lot of thought, and I've read a lot of articles or podcasts talking about, is AI coming for our jobs? Is it going to replace me? And I think one quote that I heard that was probably the closest to, I think, reality is that AI is not going to necessarily replace our jobs, but those that use AI are going to have jobs. So it's going to be an important component going forward, and it's going to be embedded even more. So let's start with something simple, just to introduce another element of a prompt. I need a timeline for this project. Very simple, but crucial for the beginning of any sort of project. And for our prompt this time, we're going to give it that actor designation where you're a project manager, but I'm going to give you way more information. I'm going to give you our entire standard operating procedure. Maybe I'm going to give it a 50-page manual. And you can attach documents through most of the paid versions of these generative processors. ChatGPT is one of them. So then now that you have all of this information, provide me a task list each month for who is to accomplish which goal. And that is easy for any AI to do. And it's not going to be perfect, but like most of these examples, AI is giving you a heck of a head start in anything. I can then take this output here and I can rewrite whatever I want for week 1, whatever I want for the description. And I may not have to correct everything, but at least it gives me a format that I can go by. And it doesn't have to stop there. You can ask for maybe a form that people can fill out to check, to add notes for each designation goal. You can make templated emails, because I know we have a lot of saved Word documents that we use as our standard emails, and this can just create them for you all in one go for any of the reminders that you may need for this timeline. And then it can create Excel documents with the same timeline as a checklist. And so this isn't all inclusive, so you may not use all of these elements, but they give you a head start and it gives you some materials to work with. So here is one of our last prompts, and this is probably my favorite, and this is what really got Raj's attention when we first started talking about this. And we came up with this presentation very organically. I showed him a couple pages. I then showed him some of the automation that I have, and he was really interested in that part. So this ties in everything. I can't do the SEO research. I can't do the course design. I can't do all the email marketing and publicity consistently with AI. I can't tell it the same prompts and expect the same output every time, unfortunately. So, but I still need to automate this work, and I still need to maintain that branding consistency and just consistency in my quality of work. So let's figure out how to do that, and AI is going to help. And it's going to take more than one prompt, way more than 3 even. So these prompts here aren't 100% what I used to finally get my end product, but for the most part, we started in 3 categories. I needed to research. I had to figure out, well, how am I going to go about automating these tasks? Give me a list of ideas I can use and give me a list of tools that would be needed. Or I told it what tools I have, and it tells me what I can do to help with this problem. And now we're going to use our strategy to then develop a prompt. So act as that prompt engineer and develop a prompt that would be used to complete this task. And I specifically attached a document there because I wanted the output to be this document each time. And through a lot of work with AI, figuring out what strategy to use, I wanted to act as an Excel expert. And I chose Excel to use, so you act as an Excel expert, proficient at VBA coding. Develop VBA code to complete this task with the following specifications. So as a result of using primarily AI to come up with the idea, to come up with the coding that was useful, I was then able to take the output, which was a much longer code than this for a VBA document, added it to my Excel files, and essentially what that did was it allowed me to create a standard input-output machine. I just have everything coded into macro buttons now so that when I write the information of a course, like the title, the description, the objectives, whatnot, I can then use these macros from the code that I got from AI to then develop exactly what I've been making all along. So I've streamlined my work quite a bit where everything is now added to one sheet, and I push a button, and it gives me the entire email publicity that I will need. It'll give me each reminder. It'll give me the faculty code to go within the course. And that's helped me a ton.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And just so we all understand, each of those are Word documents that were outputted, right?
Yeah, so the middle, I guess it's a little hard to see, but the middle part is a screenshot of an Excel document. And when I push that button, it gives me a Word document with the source code that I can then add to any Ethos source or email platform as an example of that first screenshot there.
Yeah, and so bringing this all together, if you start off with our first example of an SEO code, you could actually tie all of this together and say, generate an SEO code, look at my competitors, analyze my course landing page, give me an SEO optimized page, and then go through each of these things, generate a reminder email after 2 days, and then automatically get a Word document at the end of it. That's the power of bringing all of these together. Because oftentimes when we see these prompting examples, the real power is getting the individual prompts right, but then I think this example hopefully drives it home. Bring that all together and keep using it for each of your other courses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Excel program that I developed using AI, it's the much more standard way you would think of as a program. Here's my input, I want my output. But I could not have done that without AI's help to develop that code, or even come up with the solution for my problem that I needed to automate this.
So just curious, Andrew, if you did not have AI or if you didn't do the automation, would you have, I'm assuming you would have done manually each of these things.
Oh, yeah. I was spending hours creating the email publicity. And, every email marketing platform, you can click and drop and change the URL link. And that would take 2 to 3 hours for each of our webinar. And we go through 60 webinars a year, at least. So that was 2 to 3 hours to develop the 3 email campaigns for each one. Now it's as simple as me pushing a button, so it saved that much time. And that's with all the components of a course. So I have another button to create the course page on the Ethos course, the faculty part, the accreditation, the program. It's all coded at a push of a button.
And it's reusable, I take it.
Oh, yeah.
You could use it for all the 60 courses. Yes, he's spending the initial time to develop the prompts, perfect each of them, get to the point where it's reasonable, but then he's then reusing it for each of his 60 activities. And I'm sure most of us would empathize that none of us would be staffed with too many staff members for anything. We're always understaffed. So this, to me, was actually the home run for prompting.
And this was the strategy that I used when I was investigating or researching this with AI. What I mentioned earlier is that you can think of AI as a tool, but it's a tool that helps you enhance the tools you already have available. This is just Excel and a Word document, but AI helped me get there. And to be honest, there's going to be more advancements in AI where it's going to be within the Office applications themselves. So it's not necessarily that it's even going to advance. It's probably going to become more accessible before it becomes more advanced. So this could have been, a Python program away, or any other sort of coding that you have experience with. I chose Excel because that is available to my team, and we all know how to use Excel in a basic sense. So, yeah. So real quick with project management, there's lots of other ideas, and there's some little ones that I've used aside from the automation part. But AI assistants. So this is something that a lot of I'll say my idea, but a lot of platforms have AI chatbots to help you with a task or a question, and we always want to just quickly get to the representative every time. But you can essentially kind of create your own AI assistant. There's nothing to say that I couldn't take the maybe older Ethos manual, add it as a GPT, add the community forum as a reference point, and I can tell ChatGPT to, act as an AI chatbot working for this company. So then I can ask it my questions before I then post on the board or open Jira up. So That's one idea. Of course, any good project manager is going to take notes during a meeting, right? But AI can do that for you, and it's even built into a lot of systems now. You'll see Zoom has its own AI, you'll see WebEx has its own AI, and that's just a nice convenience, you know, with its natural language processor. It's very adept at creating a very concise outline of what the meeting was. Emails, I admit I've used AI to help me write emails, or at least, you know, what's a different way of saying I hope you're well? So I've definitely used that. Project plan and timeline, we gave that example. A detailed risk analysis, so you know, what are the bottlenecks to this plan, so I could maybe create the timeline on my own and then add it to ChatGPT and just say, what might I encounter? And just to emphasize, with my automation example there, I used AI to enhance the tools I already had. And I think that's probably the most powerful statement here. But we have created our course, our AI, mostly AI-generated course, and we've reproduced it. So hope you've learned a little bit about robots today. Yeah, and then we'll go over some future considerations while we have time. So we're all fairly new at the use of AI in our daily tasks, but this has been in development for decades. But with the semi-recent introduction to the general public, how it's become very accessible, of course, there's ethical considerations for responsible use. There's data privacy and security concerns, and even legal and regulatory concerns. For most of those points, I'm not going to stand here and say this is what you can and can't do, because it is entirely up to your organization. Working at UNC, very early on, they told us what we can and can't put into a generative processor. And that's because whatever you put into ChatGPT or whatever, it can then use within its neural network to then influence other outputs as well. And you know, without having any contractual obligation, we don't really know what the security standpoint is, and there's implications to that go beyond the scope of this presentation. But to a large extent, it's basically refer to your organization. That is your baseline. And you know, ethical concerns are pretty obvious. Do I really want AI to write an entire blog post for me? It may sound really good, but you know, is it plagiarized? Because really, AI is using examples that it has scraped on the internet to then use a sophisticated statistical analysis to determine which words come next. But it is using those examples as part of its input. So is it really yours? And can you copyright it? No, probably not. So, yeah, anything else there?
Yeah, just wanted to add a couple of different CME examples that I've heard, and I'm working with a few other customers. Today's session, like we mentioned earlier, is solely focusing on SEO and marketing. The two big areas that I've seen in the community are using AI and generative AI for faculty disclosure management. So faculty disclosure management, just to kind of review, most CME CE providers will need to go through the faculty disclosures, make sure if they're relevant, if there's a conflict, and then identify options to resolve the conflict. When we worked with a few providers, I'm personally working on some of these projects. The AI application to that is we would feed the faculty disclosure to ChatGPT and Claude, and then it would spit out the relevant conflicts for that faculty. So for example, if Dr. Sam is speaking at, has a talk with Novartis, and the talk is on opioid disorder, I would feed in a prompt and say, give me all the products that Novartis is manufacturing in opioid disorder, and then tell me if the conflict is real or is relevant or not. As with any AI prompt, it's not 100% accurate, but when I worked with all of these customers, they said it is significantly helping them reduce the amount of work with faculty disclosures, because it's heavily manual, it's heavily looking at scraping internet and finding out relevant disclosures. So that's a great example. I'm working on it, happy to give more details for anyone. Instead of ChatGPT, I'm actually using Perplexity AI for it, because Perplexity AI is less prone to hallucination. and it gives you more reliable results. So that's the second use case. The third use case is using generative AI for outcomes measurement. We have these evaluation tools from RSSs, from live and online activities, using open-ended evaluation questions and feeding them into ChatGPT or Claude or any other Gen AI tool. You're then asking it to give applicable needs assessment data. What are my learners saying? What are the specific gaps that stand out? And that analysis, most CME providers would say that you would want to do, but if you have 2 staff members, what's the probability you can scrape 10,000 open text responses? It's probably not going to be realistic, but those are the areas where AI can really help. So that's the third one, which is outcomes measurement. Yes?
So just a quick question about the disclosures. Are your clients asking permission from faculty before they're uploading all of this information into ChatGPT?
So the one we are using right now is all de-identified data. So just saying there's faculty X, but the real data is not put into the ChatGPT. Yes, 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And the same thing even with the evaluation data. We are not saying it's physician X who's given this result. We are only saying this is aggregated data that's being fed into the tool. And then ChatGPT is giving us trends. And we say ChatGPT only for sake of the session, but there are other generative AI tools as well. Perplexity AI, Claude, and a whole bunch of others. So those are the 3 main areas that I've seen over the last 1 year: SEO and marketing, faculty disclosure management, and outcomes measurement and evaluation analyses. I would love to do the other 2 as well, but I realize we all have lunch and we have a day to proceed. So we've tried to focus on SEO today.
Yeah, a good rule of thumb is that, because I was hesitant at first to add things to this monstrous machine that I didn't really understand, but a good rule of thumb, bearing in mind your organization's preferences and restrictions, is that if it is public-facing on the internet, it's probably already in a generative processor. It's not learning anything new. So I can add a webinar description without worry. I can add names for faculty and maybe their disclosures, and it's probably not breaking any rules because if it's on a website, it's already there. So just moving forward with a little bit of tips and recommendations. Like Raja was saying too, you choose the best tool for the task, and there's many different kinds of AI generators out there. I use ChatGPT primarily, but there's Bard, there's Claude, Perplexity, which I need to check out now after our conversation. And then there's any other services that utilize AI tools. So it's just picking the ones that work best for your purposes at hand. If your purpose is essentially creating text to image, there may be certain AI machines that work better to get what you want.
And one other thing, if I could add, over the last 1 year, we've seen so much of publicity about the hallucination and the veracity of generative AI. One general rule of thumb that I really liked and I wanted to share with the team is do not ask AI to do anything that you cannot verify yourself. Yeah. It is a really good assistant, but it's a confident assistant who can dream things. So if something is super, artistic, like Andrew said, developing a landing page, you could potentially take it and then review it, but never do anything that you cannot verify. And I think that's a great rule of thumb that really helped, I think, Andrew and myself, because everything that he's doing is verifiable. He can see if this HTML code is good or not. You can verify the faculty disclosures and say, okay, did this person speak at this conference? Yep. And what is the website reference for it? These are all verifiable. You're just using AI to fasten things.
Yep, I can send an email. I can see that it works because I received it, that sort of thing. And so at the bare minimum, going from that, ask for references. Just add that to your prompt every time, or add it to the settings of your ChatGPT subscription that I always want a full link reference that works. Because the problem with AI is that it is very confident, and I just love the term, but it does give you hallucinations, which are essentially errors that it's trying to convince you otherwise. So asking for a reference really helps letting you verify that that information is correct. And of course, beware of plagiarism. I think at a certain point, we're going to be seeing so much AI-generated content that you'll probably have to use AI to then distinguish whether something is AI-generated or not. So that's something that's going to be coming into play too. And then recognizing the limits. Obviously, I can't tell ChatGPT for any number of series of prompts to automate all my tasks because it's so variable. You could take some of these exact prompts that I've used and you will get a different output. And that's for any reason. It's because these systems are still learning to an extent. They're still developing how to best provide the best output for people. So unfortunately, you have to practice your prompts as a result. And there's a lot of resources that you can do for that that I'm more than happy to talk about later. Oh.
And there are tools that you could augment. And one example that Andrew gave us is the workflow automation with Excel. There are a few more examples that we wanted to list out here. Not into a lot of detail, just a little bit. So GPTs, how many of you heard about GPTs in the past? Great. For some of us who are unaware, GPT is essentially trying to combine all of these prompts together and make it more repeatable so that you're not having to paste 50 prompts every time you're doing it. So GPTs is a way to automate that or simplify that process. One great example is building a CME GPT, which is going to have all of these prompts baked in. And you can have smaller GPTs too, like a GPT for SEO, a GPT for faculty disclosures, a GPT for outcomes measurement. And then moving on to the next one, maybe build a bot that centralizes all of these together so that you're not having to do this over and over and over again. And Andrew, you've mentioned there was some GPT you were thinking about.
Yeah,
as well.
I briefly mentioned it earlier too, but you can essentially create your own chat bot or chat helper. So like I said, you could add in the information from everything ethos, whether it's the community board, the older manual that you have, and you can say, always refer to these documents and give me an explanation, act as a chatbot. So that's just one example that you can do to create your own little instances of AI. And like Raj was saying, you could even create a GPT for, here's my branding requirements, here is the hex codes I use, here's the font we use, always give me recommendations based off of this list. And then you can just return to this, that specific GPT to always give you at least more anticipated output.
I like that, more anticipated output.
Yeah, more
and then there are a couple of other tools. If your organization is using Zapier or IFTTT, these are tools that existed before AI, before generative AI, but really try to simplify that by integrating with your CRM or your marketing tool or your grant management tool and bring that power with that augmentation.
So I think with that, is there any questions?
I do have a question.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's online.
All right, so our question is, have you seen an increase in revenue since incorporating SEO keywords into your LMS courses?
We're nonprofit, so we actually don't have a cost to any of our programs. I don't necessarily think the researching for the course series has been quantitatively fruitful, but I would actually say that the course design actually for the emails has been more lucrative to actually get enrollments. So that I can attest to. For the SEO, I haven't seen too much of that yet.
All right, well, as long as there's no other questions, that was the only one that came through the audience response. Thank you so much, Andrew and Raja. That was amazing. I think I definitely learned that I'm not making AI work hard enough. Can definitely make it work harder. And we have lunch up next in room 206, so same place where breakfast was served. And our break is until 1:45. So enjoy.
Cool. Thank you.